amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello and welcome, listeners. Today I have the incredible Gina Chick as my guest. Gina was the inaugural and only female winner of Alone Australia, having lasted 67 days in the Tasmanian wilderness for this popular Australian survival show. She has appeared on ABC's Australian Story and has also just written a wonderful book called We Are the Stars. If you're ready to get lost in jungles, wander into wolf dens, sing with storms, rescue orphaned animals, dive into the depths, dance till your knees absolutely wobble, fall in love, find yourself by losing it all, and most of all, be real, this book is for you. But before you rush out and buy her book, which luckily enough is not only in print but also in audio and read by Gina herself, we're lucky enough to have her here with us today to share her story. Welcome, Gina.
Rosemary, that is one of the most wonderful introductions I think I've ever received. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you for that, and it's certainly our pleasure. Now, Gina, we might start. Tell us about growing up by the water in Jervis Bay with your two sisters and your parents who encouraged you all to be very much part of nature and the wild. And it sounds as though you were, and still are, part of a very close family, Gina.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that I'm now speaking to readers. This is great because if you've ever read Gerald Durrell's My Family and Other Animals...
I have, yes.
You're going to have an idea of my childhood. My mother calls it a free-range childhood. We were basically just romping around in Jervis Bay. I used to rescue sick and injured birds and nurse them back to health and have them in my room, in various places around the house. Mum would trip over them and shout at us. We had pet ducks that would follow us down to the beach and we'd build sandcastles for them to play in. We went out on huge adventures in boats and on windsurfers, kayaking, water skiing, bushwalking, basically every possible way, camping, that you can enjoy being in nature. That was my childhood, and I actually didn't know any different. I thought that was normal for people, and I'm so grateful that my mum and dad, grew us up like that.
How lovely! Look, in your book there is the most wonderful photo of you actually feeding a bird. Well, I can't say mouth to mouth. It was in this case actually mouth to beak. And you said you got ridiculed a little bit at school and bullied a little bit at school, but it just showed your total and complete love for animals.
Yes, absolutely. I didn't ever really think I was a human when I was a kid. I was a bit of an odd child. I felt completely at home talking to birds or the wind or the beach.
Yes.
That made sense to me, but people didn't. I didn't really know how to speak human. And so nature and animals, and particularly birds, became my haven. But the other thing that was my haven, of course, was books.
Right. And we'll come to that a little bit later because, we'll discuss it now because your mother, Suzanne, amazingly discovered that she was the daughter of the acclaimed writer Charmian Clift. Now, not only have I read most of Charmian's works, but I also read your mother's wonderful account a number of years ago of finding out about her mother. And having read your book now, I can certainly see that you've not only inherited your mother and grandmother's striking looks in genes, or genes in looks, but also both of their writing gifts. Because, Gina, so much of the prose you use in your book is not only incredibly thought-provoking, but it's also beautifully written.
Oh, thank you. That's really great to hear. That's lovely to hear. And I have to say, I've been writing ever since I was a kid. We didn't know about Charmian when we were growing up. So we knew Mum was adopted.
Yes.
But we used to fantasize about who her mother was. And we'd say things like, oh, your mother is like a famous ballet dancer because Mum had these incredible legs. Or your mother is a famous opera singer because she had this voice. Or your mother is a Russian princess because she had these cheekbones. But we never actually thought her mum, our grandmother, was someone actually famous until the adoption laws changed when I was in my early 20s. And Mum wrote away to find out who her birth mother was, and the name came back, Charmian Clift. And this was incredible. It catapulted Mum on a wonderful journey. Well, it was hard for her at the time, discovering her identity as the illegitimate first child of this incredible, trailblazing, groundbreaking writer and thinker. And Mum's book actually is coming back into print this year coming up. So
how wonderful!
Available. Yeah, Searching for Charmian's going to be back. But it's been really interesting because the way I write is not like I'm not a planner, I'm not a thinker. I don't know what I'm going to write until I write it. And the way I describe it is I stick my finger up into the ether and I hit the lightning, and the lightning comes in, it strikes me, and then it explodes me into about 10,000 pieces. And on the other side, when I put myself back together again, then there's some writing. There's a piece of writing, and I almost don't even know what's happening when it's happening. And I really feel like it's Charmian. I feel like those wild genes of Charmians that are so present in my mother as well get to express themselves through me, and I just feel so blessed.
Oh, how wonderful!
And
it comes across, Gina. It does. Have you ever been to the island of Hydra, where Charmian Clift left? Yes, we have. It's the most gorgeous island, isn't it?
Oh, well, I went there after I emerged from 67 days in the wilderness, having won Alone Australia.
Yes.
I wasn't allowed to tell anyone about it for 9 months. It was this huge secret, 9 months. And I took myself off to the Greek islands, because I'd been in the Tasmanian wilderness in the middle of winter, surviving completely on my own for this whole time. And I had to solve the challenges of shelter and water. I had to catch fish, and I jumped on a wallaby and, ate that. And all of these things, I was very dirty and I was very cold and I was very wet. And then when I came out, I went to the Greek islands for 6 weeks. I went to Greece for 6 weeks, and I ended up spending a week on Hydra. And it's the first time I've actually really gone looking for Charmian for myself. Right. Mum went on a massive journey with Charm, and I was so happy for her that she had found her mother and everything that came with that. But I actually hadn't read any of Charmian's work, funnily enough, because I didn't want to alter my own writing voice. I'm very protective of my voice, and I knew if I read her, I would start writing like her, and I was like, no, I want to write like me. So I hadn't chased her down for myself until 53, I think I was. That's right, it was my 53rd birthday. I spent my 53rd birthday on Hydra, and I went and found Charmian's house, looking for her. And I was looking for her in the streets, I was looking for her in the ocean, and I couldn't find her because it's now, it's full of tourists and yachts, and I was looking for the sponge divers, I was looking for the donkeys. But then, and her house was empty, and I had these fantasies of knocking on the door and someone saying, oh, you look like her. Didn't find her there. But the taverna, the one around the corner, where there is a famous photo of her with Leonard Cohen leaning on his shoulder.
Yes.
I found that taverna. I found that tree.
Yes.
Burst into tears. Sat there with my guitar, singing a song, and I in my heart, I saw her and I felt her come home to me for the very first time.
Oh, and isn't it amazing that then, you were brought up in Jervis Bay, of course, and then Kiama is where Charmian was born and brought up, all sort of within the similar sort of area. But now, Gina, you left school and you went to university, but you discovered that really wasn't for you. So you say in your book that you spent quite a bit of time after that living a life bigger than ever. You said, in fact, a bit too big at times, where you explored your sexuality and you lived very much part of the gay scene and that in Sydney. So that was an interesting time when you were sort of discovering yourself then.
It was. I think because I had such a hard time with my peers at school because I was so strange. And I was always told, either implicitly or explicitly, that I was too big, too much, too loud, which I think is one of the things that Charmian went through as well. There's just too much human in one body, and where can it fit? But then when I found the queer scene in the 90s in Sydney, I found a community that welcomed me for my size and for my intelligence and for my creativity and for my, the way I would just suddenly turn up in 4 different outfits in one night, or I got to express the parts that had been really suppressed in a
Yes.
small town, a small coastal town in the 80s in Australia. And I found a home there. I found a homecoming. I found a community. I found communion. And I explored things in my own way. And again, Charmian uses an Icarus metaphor quite a bit, or an Icarus metaphor is used for her quite a lot. And I think I inherited that as well, because I definitely flew too close to the sun.
Right.
And through a series of choices that led me into the arms of a con man, made a very disastrous decision to love this man, and I broke my life well and truly, and it was a result of my own choices.
Right.
And then I had to find my way through the rubble, and I think that was probably the beginning of the getting of wisdom.
And then you found Lee. You went off to live in the American wild, where you met your husband, Lee, and it sounded like a wonderful match. And then he came back to Australia with you, Gina. But he found that a bit hard, I think, didn't he, coming back and living in suburban Sydney compared to what he was living in America?
Absolutely. So when I met Lee, it was at a Native American primitive survival school based on the teachings of a Lipan Apache named Grandfather. And it's basically how to survive in the wilderness as hunter-gatherers have survived for, the 350,000 years that we've been Homo sapiens, and 340,000 of those years in our DNA is hunter-gatherers. So there's this vast bank of wisdom that we have as a species sort of wrapped up in our DNA somewhere. This is a school that teaches those skills. So how to make fire by rubbing sticks together, and how to find water on the landscape, how to get your needs met from nature, living in harmony. And I took to that like a duck to water, and I met this wonderful, strange creature who was living there for a year. And as I say in the book, he followed me home, so I kept him.
Oh.
And thinking, as when you're in love and you think, this is going to be fabulous, he's going to love all my friends, he's going to love my life. And he was a wild creature who suddenly was living in a house in Bondi, and he didn't cope at all.
I think your mother, found him on the streets of Bondi, wasn't it, with sticks in front of him or something, and
pretty much,
that's how she met him. But Gina, you went on to get married, and you became pregnant, but then sadly you discovered when you were pregnant that you had breast cancer. Now, you were advised to terminate your pregnancy, but you refused, and you did say you found a doctor who encouraged you to continue and with the chemo and also for the term of your pregnancy. And the beautiful, beautiful daughter Blaze was born, who you and Lee fell instantly in love with. And looking at the wonderful photos in your book, she was just beautiful. So can you tell us a little bit about that time?
Yeah, so Blaze was an extraordinary child. I was told to terminate the pregnancy or I would die. I had a doctor say this, and there's a part in the book where I describe what happened as a result of that, like what arose in me, which was this very instinctive voice that just said, no, there's got to be another way. And the way that I found, it was a narrow path, but I found that you could actually have chemo in pregnancy, and the babies are usually small. That's the side effect. They're small.
Yes.
But they're okay. They catch up. But Blaze was 10 pounds in an hour and a half at 41. Let me tell you, that's a very, very big experience. So she arrived healthy and big and beautiful, and she was like this. It was like she was cut out of the silence. That's the way I sort of describe when she was first born. I felt like I had fallen into some other world or some other door where she was made of the silence, and the silence was looking out of her eyes at me, and I could almost, touch the infinite through her. And it was an amazing time because, Lee was this wild creature. I was, by this point, a wild creature. And we lived in the bush with her, and she knew the calls and the names of the birds, and she would talk to them. She would talk to them as if she was a bird, and they would talk back as if she was a bird. and it was like the bush came in to meet her, and that was all she knew. All she knew was how to get the witchetty grub sap, the witchetty grubs and eat them, or the wattle sap, or saying hello to the robin and having the robin say back. So she had this incredible life. But the other thing that was really beautiful about those times was I used to buy clothes from Vinnie's, right? Second-hand clothes.
Because the photos you've got of her in her book, and I'll just interrupt you for 1 second, because just for our listeners, you're listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is Gina Chick, the inaugural winner of the popular TV series Alone and the author of a best-selling memoir, We Are the Stars. But yes, Gina, going back to the photos in your book of Blaze, she had a character of her own, didn't she? She had clothes and she just
absolutely.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd buy these, I'd buy these secondhand, cheap clothes, cheap kids' clothes at Vinnie's, and I'd put them in this giant box. And every morning she would take sometimes 2 hours dressing herself, and I would let her. So then she developed her own style, and there's this whole page of photos of her outfits that she has chosen every single thing. She's got headdresses, she's got sunglasses, she's got handbags, she's got shoes, she's got socks. And when you see the way she put things together, my goodness, I reckon that kid was going to be a fashion designer.
Exactly. But sadly, I don't want to harp on that, but sadly you and Lee lost Blaze, didn't you? And ultimately your marriage it didn't actually survive after the tragedy, but you've gone on to be the bestest of friends, and in actual fact now you're godmother to his 2 children, aren't you?
Yes. So, my feeling with this is it's sometimes little people die. Sometimes that happens, and what I discovered was that by saying yes to everything that was her gift, it meant saying yes to the losing of her as much as the having of her. And I can honestly say that having her was the greatest gift of my life, and losing her was the second greatest gift of my life. And because of the having and the losing of her, I am kinder and wiser, and I've got more capacity to hold and to be compassionate and understand. And I know so much more about the world, and I dance through life with so much joy. Like, I find the wonder in every moment, and I feel like it's her eyes that I look through. It's like I get to walk her gift into the world. So even though it is a tragedy, for me it is also an amazing gift. Like, she is such an amazing gift, and the way I write that in this book, you'll find if you do read this book, it's like the voice changes throughout the different stages. It isn't written as a normal memoir.
No,
it's almost written like a novel. Yeah,
exactly.
So
but at the very end of your book, Gina, you say, "I remember, love, I remember," and I think that's one of the loveliest things there.
Yeah.
But Gina, you went on from there. You're obviously an incredibly strong woman, because you went on there then to be selected, and I'm jumping ahead, I know, quite a bit, to be a competitor in Alone Australia. Now, how did that come about? And tell us a little bit about that particular time.
Absolutely. So after Blaze sort of flew away, Lee was my husband at the time, we started up these camps called Rewild Your Child, where we were taking families out in the bush and teaching the kids how to make fire by rubbing sticks together and make bows and arrows, and the families all camped together, and they're these, like, to make a village in the bush. They were amazing. They are amazing camps. And in the process of that, we also started taking people out into the wilderness in groups to help them to be like a small adult village, learning how to survive in the wild.
Right.
And how to be. And I'm not talking about survival like Bear Grylls survival. It's not that knuckle dragging.
Yes.
It's how do we live as a wild thing lives in harmony with the environment, getting our needs met, because that is the premise of hunter-gatherer survival, where there is true connection with ourselves and each other and our village and nature, and some kind of meaning-making system where we get to have a sense of something greater than us, whatever that is.
Yes.
And so we've been doing that now we've actually been doing that for 15 years.
Right.
And Blaze flew away about 11 years ago. And so these camps just kept rolling, and I just kept on deepening into facilitation of these kind of experiences. And then when Alone was first sort of screened, I had people saying, "You've got to watch this show." And my thoughts were, reality shows aren't actually real, and survival shows are fake. You know, Bear Grylls goes home at lunchtime. The Survivor, it's all managed. It's not actually real, and I don't have any time for reality shows, so I was like, I'm not watching this thing. But after COVID, I just had one day when I thought, I'll just have a look at this Alone malarkey. And I watched one of the US versions, the Northern Hemisphere versions, and realised very quickly that it is real.
Yes.
That people are dropped
very real,
completely solo in winter into some wilderness with 10 basic items, and then they have to survive and film themselves. There's no film crews. There's no producers. They don't have contact with each other. They don't even know how anybody else is doing. It's very real.
And you of course, were dropped into the wilderness of Tasmania, and I lived in Tasmania for 30-odd years, so I know that is hard country, Gina.
It is really hard country. And so I was actually approached by one of the producers when it first came to, being cast in Australia, and I only just found it. And so then all of a sudden my inbox was full of people saying, "Gina, Alone's coming, you should apply." And I did apply, and from, I think it's like 7,000 people applied, and, then it got down to 20, and I was one of the last 10 selected, one of the 10 selected. And I was out there for 67 days, and the oldest person ever to win, but also at the time, no woman had won it when I went out, and I wanted to be the first woman to do so.
And no woman has won it since.
No, they actually they have. So when
have they?
So when the boot camp happened, which was the week where we got trained how to use the cameras, there were people visiting who do the Scandinavian version of Alone.
Right. And
just before I went out, I discovered that a Danish woman had won the Scandinavian version.
Oh.
So I was the second female winner, and I do not begrudge her at all because she's awesome.
Gina, I know time goes so quickly, we're sadly running out of time, but you are on a national tour for your book. So I am just going to tell a little bit. Well, actually, I'm actually going to tell it through the eyes of Hugh Jackman. Because he says in the beginning of Gina's book, if you want to know what it's like to spend time with someone so funny and wise and so brutally honest that your jaw is permanently on the floor and your heart is singing, Gina's memoir quite simply broke me open. Her powerful poetic mixture of truth, humour, hard-fought wisdom and unblinking authenticity radiates from every page. From the first paragraph, it dawned on me that this is unlike anything I have ever read before. I can't wait to give this book to everyone I love to read. And that's Hugh Jackman. So Thank you, Gina Chick, and the inaugural winner of Alone Australia and author of We Are the Stars, a magic carpet ride through the exquisite mystery of the human heart, for being my guest today on Lots to Chat About. And can I tell our listeners that We Are the Stars is available in all bookshops, or most bookshops. It's also on audio, which is wonderful for our listeners, and Gina reads it herself, which is an absolute extra bonus. And her website is www.ginachick, GINACHICK.com, and you can follow her on Facebook and Instagram. So thank you, Gina.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And hi, and thank you to everybody listening.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.